Welcome to Being at Home with George during the time of COVID. And I'd like to create the possibility of being able to embrace whatever comes up, saying yes to it, and at the same time, generating hope. And this week, I'd like to talk about there's a quote here from a book called Let Your Life Speak. And the quote is: "The experience of darkness has been essential to my coming into selfhood. The telling the truth about the fact helps me stay in the light." And so this idea of being authentic, being in the moment, being in the here and now, and being able to embrace things, because the light illuminates. The light allows us to stay in the moment and to interpret experience in ways that allow us to know the truth, and the truth shall make us free. And of course, I can talk about my own experience of whatever challenges I've had around substance abuse or even conflicts or frustrations. And the first thing that I have to be able to do is to see the truth uncritically, to be able to see what's there and to recognize that something happens and I interpret what it means. And so for me, how I interpret it is going to be predicated on whatever thoughts that are operating in the background, whatever glasses I happen to have on. And I like to talk about this a lot around the idea of we're either in survival mode or growth mode, we're either in fear or we're in love. And I talk about this with the two wolves inside of us that are fighting, and the one that we feed is the one that succeeds. And so, from what I could see from my own experience, is embracing the fact that, yes, I have a problem with substance abuse. And it's by accepting that and saying that's the truth of the matter, that I couldn't stop doing what I was doing, even though I knew it was not helpful. And by me embracing it, saying yes to it, generating a hope and transforming myself, my mind, my way of being, that it keeps me in the light. And as long as I'm in the light, I'm in this process of growth mode, and I'm continuing to evolve and to grow and to learn from my mistakes and learn from everything that happens. And so this idea of approaching things with a filter of curiosity and fascination that allows me to be open and to be able to learn. I think that's something that we all could do. And so when something happens, we interpret what it means. And so what I've learned is, and I talk about this idea of mindfulness, this idea of observing experience uncritically without the fear glasses on, but having the love glasses on, which allows me to suspend disbelief, even though I might not believe something, but to suspend it so that I can get the information, so I can let things speak to me in its own language and get the information that way, and delaying gratification, delaying this need to be right, this need to just jump on a bandwagon. And so when you think about it, how many times have you watched a sports event when your team was playing another team, and whether it's football or basketball, the official makes a call, and it's amazing how you can have two different factions looking at the same event and having a different opinion of what actually happened. So it could be in a sense where I was watching one game where there was the Celtics playing the Dallas Mavericks, and I think it was Marcus Smart was taking a jump shot, and as he was releasing the ball, his hand was hit by the opposition. And at first they called it a 3-point shot foul, that it was a foul because he was hitting the act of shooting. And then they reviewed it and they said it was no foul. And it's interesting because it's an interpretation of what happened, but depending on who you were, if you were a Celtic fan, you saw it as being robbed or that was the wrong call. If you're a Dallas fan, you see it as, hey, that was the right call, and based on the rule book. So you look at things. So something happens, then we interpret what it means. I think the whole key here is to understand that we can see things differently. And if we're able to put on the same filter or the deterministic screen that the other person is looking through, we will come to the realization that if we saw things the way that they saw them, we do what they were doing and we feel the way that they did. And part of getting together and part of being connected and unified is to be able to seek to understand rather than to be understood and say, yes, I see your point, but that's not accurate. This is what the rules say, and get to a place where we can say, okay, I agree to disagree, or yes, I didn't get the game stolen from me. So when you think about it in terms of nations, if we talk about what's happening in Ukraine, the inability to have a fundamental baseline that says we want peace, and then being able to come together and seek to understand and seek to get someplace, but it's really, really complicated. And so that's a big global issue. But every day we interact with people. We're in the cars, and are we being kind to each other? Are we willing to allow ourselves to say I am the other one, and seeing through the lens of love, seeing through the lens of how can I treat people the way I wanted to be treated. And so when I think about this and I think about that, we have to understand I got on the fear glasses and I'm going to interpret the same event that someone else will interpret with love glasses on differently. But we have to get to the point where we can be mindful and understand we don't really need a filter other than love, other than being open heart, open mind, and having curiosity, having fascination. Well, what is this? How can I know the truth so the truth shall make me free, but also keep me in the light so that we can solve problems instead of assuming that there's no problem, being in the denial or saying my truth is my truth instead of realizing, no, that's not the truth. That's how things occur to you. That's how you're interpreting things. And there's a basic fundamental truth that gravity exists. And so if we can get to that point where we know gravity exists and we can investigate, see that if you jump up, you will come down. So you don't have to believe in gravity. It just is. So when we can have a tangible object that we're discussing, how do we get to the place where we can agree to disagree or not make the other person wrong because they don't see things the way that we see things? And so to me, I think it's really important if we could just start seeing ourselves with kind eyes. And I'm not saying to be kind of a doormat or anything. I'm saying, can we mean what we say without being mean when we say it? And can we understand that some people think the truth is what I say it is? And on some level, that's true, because if we consent to something being true, it'll be true. So if we consent that gravity doesn't work and it's not real, then we will believe that and act as if that's true. And it's only when we're willing to investigate and to verify it that we'll realize that it is true. If we jump up, we will come down. And so I just think that all of this misinformation out there in the digital echo and everybody hating on each other and not even thinking about how can we compromise, and knowing that compromise is not a dirty word, but depending on if you got the fear glasses on, then compromise could be a dirty word. But if we have the love glasses on and we say, no, let's compromise and come to a place where I and the other are one, or realize what we learned in kindergarten is that we treat people the way that we would like to be treated. So the question is, are we seeking to understand, then to be understood, or are we seeking to be understood before we understand? As Stephen Covey talks about in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is a way to get to synergy or get to harmony, to get to a place where we can agree to disagree and not be disagreeable.